a bad product, you can throw as much growth tactics on it as you want, it's not going to work. And so the first step really always needs to be achieving product market fit. And so you also, in that phase, you look for very different KPIs. You look at your customer comments, you look at their feedback, their suggestions.
Project A podcast.
So welcome to the Project A podcast. I'm Florian Heinemann. I'm one of the founding partners at Project A. And our today's guest is Aaron Rosen. He has been with us now for
6 years now.
6 years. So almost as long as the company exists. And Aaron is heading our growth initiative as part of marketing, but not only part of marketing, because growth is obviously something that goes way beyond that. And we want to discuss today what growth marketing is, how you can implement that in your company, and who would be better to talk about this than Aaron, who has a lot of experience in this.
Let's do that, Flo.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so that's cool. So let's probably start with some observations. How has the marketing landscape changed, and why has growth marketing become something that one should probably consider even more than a few years ago? I mean, everybody knows about the famous stories about Airbnb and Facebook, and also companies like Deliveroo, how they really benefited from growth marketing. So that would be a reason per se to really think about how you could implement that for your company. But other observations in the area of marketing that we think you should consider is with the increasing dominance of Google, Amazon, and Facebook, Apple not so much in the marketing world, but of GAFA in general, I think there is several things that you can deduct from that. I mean, one thing that's quite obvious, if there's auction mechanisms or auction systems or underlying auction systems controlling customer access, and these auction mechanisms drive the margin of the platforms up and the margins of the advertisers down, you have to somehow move outside of the platform economy. And that obviously speaks for, or is a strong argument to increase your CRM initiative. I mean, that's one conclusion you can take from that. And the other is that you have to become a lot more creative when it comes to acquisition. I think that's the other argument. And growth can be both. It can be retention-centric and it can be acquisition-centric. So let's probably talk about this. I mean, where do you see the main levers in growth marketing? So what kind of things and factors are addressed by growth marketing, and what are the levers?
I think that typically in the last years in marketing, we have focused a lot on performance marketing. And so we see in our portfolio companies and in general very good performance marketing teams that are specialized for the different channels like SEA, display, SEO affiliate, and so on and so forth. And this can all be part of growth marketing, but growth is so much more than that, because in growth, it is just generally about the inflow and outflow of users into your product, meaning your website, your app. And so we look at acquisition, so into these performance marketing channels. But as you said, also you need to be more creative about the different channels. So you need to be open about which ways of acquisition actually work best for your product specifically. It's about activation, onboarding, retention, so CRM as one of the big success factors, how to create revenue, and also all referral activity. So this actually goes way beyond acquisition. It goes beyond these single channels that, of course, if they are relevant for your business, you do need to specialize in. And it also goes beyond the marketing department itself. So very often we see that product is deciding how the product is going to evolve. IT builds it, and then marketing gets told to promote it. And this is sort of the order of things. But with a growth team, all of this happens in one team. So it is decided together how a product is going to evolve, and marketing, IT, product, and of course also BI with insights on data work together on these specific challenges that a company has and how it wants to grow.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about the approach there? I mean, how do you? I mean, you've established such a team, and you have BI, you have product, you have marketing. You probably have a designer and somebody from IT, so you can theoretically do everything. So how do you do this? I mean, how do these people work? I mean, how does a growth approach look like typically?
Yeah, so it's basically a cycle of 4 steps. So first of all, you want to have a lot of data, and it's totally data-driven, the approach. So you look very deep into qualitative and also quantitative data that you have from all the different data sources about your product, about how customers use it, analytics, and also research and customer interviews. And with this data, you build hypotheses on how you can improve the different aspects of your product and your acquisition strategies. And from that, you derive ideas that you can test, and then you test rapidly, and you test a lot, because most of the things you test are going to fail, but some of them are really going to work very well, and these are the ones that you can then build on. And so everything that works you implement, and then it's a constant cycle, and you do that again and again and again, and you learn from the tests that fail. I think it's also very important to look at that and to think about also with the data you gather why these tests didn't work. So you need to be very smart about coming up with creative ideas, what your users may want, based on the data you see, and continuously test the things that could if they worked well, have a massive impact.
May I compliment? I mean, one thing that you typically see when you have these hypotheses is, or that we experience at least, you should focus on one KPI, whether it's the conversion rate, the CLV of the customer, or another typical KPI is the referral rate, where you basically see how many users are basically referring other users and how you can accelerate on that. I mean, you've seen Facebook has done a great job in this in the beginning, or Zing, for example, has also been very famous. And a lot of people call that hacks when you see that, and you prefer, or we also here at Project A prefer not so much growth hacking, but we prefer growth marketing as a term. I mean, it's just terminology, so it doesn't matter so much. But could you still elucidate or discuss a little bit about what's the difference between growth hacking and growth marketing? Is there a difference? Why do we prefer growth marketing? Would be, I think, great to understand a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think these single things, and there are so many examples known, such as this auto signature that Hotmail had in the beginning, getting new users in, or Airbnb pushing their ads on Craigslist, these kind of things, those are growth hacks. But when people talk about someone being a growth hacker or doing growth hacking, it gives the impression that basically this job is about these few ideas that work, and basically just going around looking for those examples and implementing those for your company. And this is not what actually creates constant and successful continuous growth in a company. But what it's about is this approach that I just detailed how you're going to work. And so I think that when you talk about growth hacking, it gives more importance on these single things that are being implemented, rather than this constant approach. And I mean, growth is generally a mindset, that ideally the whole company has, starting with the founder, the CEO, that you really just look at how can we, on every different aspect of the customer journey, increase the conversion rate and really create these growth loops at every step in order to get users in order to activate them, in order to get them to refer. And the way to get there is through constant experiments and not through implementing the 3 or 4 wonders that you have read about that have made Facebook successful or something like that.
And I think that's a really key point, that we're rather talking about a system or like a mindset that translates into a system or systematic process, just like performance marketing activities have traditionally been very process focused and not so much about singular big events. I mean, if you hit the singular big event, that's great, but it's more about doing a couple of tests per week or a couple of tests per month.
And you will hit those things, but you will only hit those regularly if you test even more, and you really need to test a lot. And this accumulation of a lot of individual things that each give you like a few % more in conversion rate are really gonna change everything in the long run.
Could you talk about like which kind of companies need a growth team? I mean, when does it make sense? I mean, we are in a startup world. We often invest early. We sometimes invest in companies that don't have a product market fit yet. Sometimes they never find it, but we obviously hope they will. And can you talk a little bit about what kind of where does it make sense and when to like follow these initiatives?
Well, basically every company that wants to grow should think about having a growth team and having that approach. But yes, it is a very good question to think about. Okay, when do which activities actually make sense? And you mentioned product market fit. So I think the first step of a business needs to be to find product market fit and to really make sure that you see those signals that people do want your product, that your product does grow organically, that there is like an organic referral happening, that there's interest, and only when this is given, it makes sense to look at what you can do to acquire more users and so on and so forth, because like a bad product, you can throw as much growth tactics on it as you want, it's not going to work. And so the first step really always needs to be achieving product market fit. And so you also in that phase you look for very different KPIs. You look at your customer comments, you look at their feedback, their suggestions.
Potentially Net Promoter Score could be something.
Absolutely, yeah. So the NPS will, and especially the comments that come with it, will inform you about what users want, what they need, and how satisfied they are with the product you're giving them. And then when you are in the region that you have achieved product market fit, you also need to make sure that your unit economics work and that you're actually not losing more money with every new user that you gain, because then if you do very successful growth initiatives, you're gonna burn the money that you have very fast, and then this can also quickly lead to failure. So I think then it is important to work out which acquisition strategies actually make sense for you in terms of also how much they cost, what CLV you have for every single user and customer, and when you there come to a point that this makes sense, then this can be scaled. Of course, during the whole time you can already work on improving conversion rates on every step of the funnel, but I wouldn't throw all my energy into acquiring users as long as I know that this basically just increases the loss that my company makes. And I think it's also very important to think about what kind of tests you do at which stage of the company, because of course with like a Facebook with their size, they can make a tiny adjustment and test that with a few % of their users, and after a few hours they will have statistically relevant and significant results, and then they can move on. But if you're just starting out and your testing idea is to move a button around on a page, you will have to wait weeks until you have any significant result there, if ever. And so I think in the beginning, it's not about making tiny adjustments that may give you like a 2% increase or something like that, but there you make the really big strategic decisions of how you're going to approach acquisition in general, or what the USP of your product is, and things like that. And so you really need to work on points that potentially will like increase your conversion rate by 200% or something like that. And this is when you're also going to see results in the beginning. And also when you start, you need to make sure that you have a setup that you start collecting data from day one, that you are tracking things correctly. But in the very beginning, you're not going to have enough data to really work with that. And so you need to rely a lot on talking to customers, talking to potential customers, and just listening to them and implementing what you derive from that, what might help you with your product. And then later, when you gather more data, because you have set that foundation in the beginning, then you can also work well with the data in order to come up with more hypotheses.
One point that relates to that is, when you talk about statistical significance and things like that, and a lot of data that you need, is growth marketing mainly a B2C kind of initiative or approach, or can it also be used in B2B? What's your experience there? I mean, we have 50% of portfolio companies by now are probably B2B. And does it help there as well?
This is just as relevant for B2B as it is for B2C. So you look at different things typically in those two, depending on what the business is like, because in B2B it is often more about sales also, and not only marketing. But there it is just as important, to see marketing and sales as an integrated function of your company that also needs to be optimized at every step, and where you can work on improving the conversion rates.
So let's summarize. It's like, which companies should use growth marketing, or should at least think about using it? It's B2B, B2C, no matter what. It's usually companies where there's at least a certain product market fit there. I mean, obviously, growth marketing can help you to improve the conversion rate so that the unit economics make sense, but really pushing a lot on growth marketing only makes sense if you have found product market fit. Shitty product doesn't work with growth marketing.
Shitty product never works.
Shitty product never works. It shouldn't. That's completely okay. And if you have a certain understanding of a unit economics and of the KPIs that are relevant, and if you have a certain amount of traffic, etc., coming in a sensible kind of way, because that makes testing ideas obviously a lot easier. That's I think very, very helpful. There's frameworks how to structure growth initiatives a little bit, which always helps, to structure your own work. Which framework do you prefer? Can you give an example of what kind of initiatives fall in this framework, and what kind of structure?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of what I call the growth engine, which is you might have heard of the R model, AARRR, which stands for acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral. So this is basically you can see that as a circle of a customer life cycle, if you want, that starts with acquisition and ends with referral. And you have a conversion rate at every one of those steps. And I would, as a hypothetical goal, always look at, okay, I want to have 100% conversion rate, ideally, in every one of those steps. And if you ever got there, you could basically lean back and watch your growth engine do the work for you, because if you have found those growth loops on every single one of those stages, then simply every customer or like every user that comes to your app, comes to your website, will become a paying customer, will constantly come back and will refer new users and new customers. And this should always be the goal. And you don't have to work on this in that order, but I think it's important to track the conversion rates constantly at every different one of those steps, and you will very easily then also notice which of those areas is the one that really needs the most work because it has the lowest conversion rate. And
so the key task is really to find out which is kind of the maximum natural conversion rate that you can get from each step to the next.
Yeah.
Because I guess 100% conversion rate is not realistic. even in offline marketing with people standing behind you with guns, it's probably not realistic. But like trying to basically find out what's kind of a realistic goal if you do a very good job in every funnel step, that's key. And also trying to find out where are you still fairly low in the natural kind of curve, because as always, the higher you get to the max, it will be harder to achieve marginal improvements. Yeah, and
Exactly.
For that, I guess the BI person as part of the growth team should do his job or her job and try to find that out where you should focus on.
Yeah, you need to be able to have a clear view of these conversion rates at all time. And yeah, as you said, if you see that you already have a 70% activation rate, but you have 5% referral rate as an example, then obviously you're gonna gain more by focusing on referral first, because then this is where there would be a lot to win, and then this is where I would start before looking at even more increasing activation rate, for example.
But I think that's a very, very interesting point that you said. Despite growth marketing being a very broad concept per se, it's very important that at any given point in time you have to focus the efforts to very specific steps in the conversion rate. And I think that's the difficulty often for teams, that they need to constantly refocus themselves to different parts of this R model, that you are basically able to do that by yourself or being guided by the BI person.
Yeah, well, that also depends on the company and how you structure it, because you might have one or start with one growth team that is basically jumping to these different steps and where they can help the most. But you can also come to a point where every one of those steps has a dedicated team. And then it's just part of your growth team. You have like the people responsible for activation, the people responsible for referral, and so on, that constantly work on this. And this is where you should be heading for going forward. But yeah, as I said, you start with the lowest hanging fruit, obviously. And so if we look at those different steps and what things are that can be done there. So if we start with acquisition, for example, as I said, the typical performance channels will be a part of that. But in the beginning, you also don't know actually which channels are the ones that are going to be really relevant for your business. And so I would not hire an SEA specialist if I don't even know if SEA is going to be the relevant thing for my business. But first, you just see that very open and you test many different ways to acquire users and come up with hypotheses why certain things might work or might not work, and then you derive from that and you find out what works. So at our portfolio company Keats, for example, that have a business model that is not so typical, because their customers are actually customers of delivery, food delivery platforms like Deliveroo, Uber Eats, and so on. So their marketing needs to get the existing users of those delivery platforms to choose their brands. And there we're testing a lot of different approaches and seeing, for example, that when we do out-of-home activities, that there we typically have lower CPOs than with online activities, or when it comes to performance marketing on Facebook, Instagram, that we see much better results sponsoring influencer postings that feature the different food that the Keats brands offer, rather than sponsoring our own content, things like that. And so you just test a lot, and also you need to look beyond the typical channels and just be creative about which tactics might actually work for acquiring users. Home Day, for example, from our portfolio, their big acquisition tactic, if you want, is evaluation for real estate, so that you just enter the details of your home in order to get an evaluation of its value, and this is how they generate leads. And then in turn, if you're interested in knowing the valuation of your home, there's a chance you might also be interested in selling it.
Yeah, Home Day is a digital real estate broker, basically. Yeah, and that's why that makes sense for them. You mentioned, and I think that's a very interesting aspect. You mentioned that if you have a traditional, or if you have a performance marketing team already, or if SEA is a relevant channel for you, or Facebook or whatever, then you might have dedicated specialists there. So what is the relationship between a growth marketing team and channel specialists, as you will find them in most performance marketing teams, probably here in Berlin and also elsewhere? Does growth team replace a performance marketing team? Is a performance marketing team part of that? Are there parallel structures? Can you talk a little bit about this? Because I think that's that I often get asked by CMOs. It's like, should I structure everything around growth, or should I still have channel specialists? How do we have a view there, or do we have an opinion?
Yeah, I think there's not the one perfect setup that I need to install in every single company, but there are different ways. But one thing is for sure, if you do know of specific performance marketing channels that work for you, you will need or should keep the specialists for those channels. So this is something that I would never replace by a general growth marketing person. Because if SEA is a relevant channel for you, you really need to focus on that, and you need people who are absolute cracks in these areas. How this is structured within your organization, I think there are two ways to do it, and I don't see a right or wrong there. So you could have a performance marketing team that is actually separate from a growth team, and the growth team just works on the things that are relevant besides those performance marketing channels that are being done. Or these performance specialists could also be part of a growth team, and then work on their specialties within that, and then you would either have a CMO, you would have a VP growth, or you would have both.
Okay, makes sense, and I think that all depends also on the people you probably have in your organization, and what you could also have, and I think that's something that you sometimes see if you see a certain approach working on a regular basis that you find through a growth team, you might also put dedicated specialists on that, running that approach on a regular basis. That can be a channel, but that can also be a certain approach of generating and distributing content through various channels. So I think defining or viewing at the specialist kind of role in a broader sense probably makes sense, and saying, okay, if the growth team comes up with a certain growth mechanism, just put dedicated people in a dedicated process and dedicated systems behind it. So the both kind of, or both approaches kind of work collaboratively with each other, and I think that's a very important thing to point out.
Exactly.
Okay, but if you say like a CMO, is that the person to run both, or VP growth, or what's our experience there? Also, does the founding team need to be involved there? I mean, what's our view there? How can you get this going? Also, given the cross-functional nature that you described earlier.
Yeah, as I said, growth is something that includes marketing, that includes product, that includes BI, that includes IT and design. And so I don't think that a CMO alone should be the person saying, okay, I'm now going to do growth. But this is something that needs to come from the founder or from the CEO, so that you ensure that there is a structure of a growth team that really covers all those areas. And that doesn't mean that from one day to the other you need to completely change the structure of your company and say, okay, now we don't have a product team anymore, we don't have a marketing team anymore. No, you can start slowly, and you can just say, for example, I said earlier, imagine that your referral rate is very low. Then you just say, okay, I'm going to create a cross-functional team that's going to work on referral. And so you have a marketer in there, you have a product person in there, a data engineer in there, a BI specialist. And these people will then work on this one project. And you should give them some time in order to learn a lot, in order to see what works. And you should also give them a lot of autonomy as a founder or as a CMO, because what's really important then in such a project is speed, and is the ability that you can test a lot and constantly test. And so if you have someone who's constantly blocking because a certain color is not part of the CI, or because you have to wait for the next board meeting to make the strategic decision and so on, then you can really basically kill this before it even gets started. And so this team that works on this special project, I think it's also important that they really communicate a lot to the whole company, that they share the experiments that they are doing and the learnings in order to create a growth mindset in the whole company. And so for everyone to realize also that how many things you can test, and also typically if you ask people to guess the result of tests, they will be wrong very often. And so this also gets people to realize that a testing culture is so important, because your intuition just doesn't always work, and very often you assume the complete opposite. And so if you start with such a team and they constantly share this, then you can move on, and you can create more teams around this growth idea, and have a cross-functional teams, and they can work on different areas. And so then you have to be flexible about how this gets structured in the end. But I think to get started, it is really totally fine to just pick one topic, be it like the checkout and improving that and the conversion rate there, and just to show, okay, we can have cross-functional teams, and to give them the chance to prove themselves, and to see with what speed they can come up with improvements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, because I think what you can definitely say is, if you work in a very structured kind of performance marketing setting, it's easier for individuals to deliver a certain performance, but you're definitely reaching probably a certain maximum performance within that channel. But I think if you have a very able and skilled growth team that learns how to work together in a very productive way, the outcome can be a lot better or a lot more impactful. But obviously the demands on the individuals doing this are higher than working in a kind of structured and rather limited channel kind of environment. And I think that's what you need to be very sensitive to as a founder, or as a CMO, as a VP growth. How advanced are we as an organization? Are we able to deliver very good results? And that's quite interesting. If you talk to very good and experienced growth marketeers, they all say if you have the right people in place and they found out how to work together in a productive way, the outcome can be amazing. But if that's not the case, the outcome can be real crap. So I think the variance in performance or in output in growth teams is a lot higher than you would see that in a typical performance marketing team. To the great, but also to the worse, obviously. So can you give us some more concrete examples of, because people will say, okay, I've got the idea, but it's still quite abstract, Aaron. I need more ideas, more inspiration, and concrete examples of how these growth initiatives can look like. Can you just give us some more examples from the portfolio, outside the portfolio, so that people get a better idea of what we're talking about here in real life?
So let's look at the activation stage, for example. So this is about increasing the conversion rate for registration, and it's about getting people to an aha moment that they really see the value of your product really quickly, ideally within 60 seconds or so of starting to sign up, and designing this, for example, to have a B2B case from our portfolio, Clara, which is a communication tool in the medical sphere between patients, hospital doctors, and so on. They have tested a lot about improving their lead conversion rate, and so they have seen that when they take out the step of confirming a time for a demo of their tool, but really putting a lead directly onto a calendar view so that they can immediately choose a time for having that demo call, that they got to a 60% conversion rate from lead to demo.
So they replaced the typical call me back button with you are on the lead, you are in the driver's seat as a customer, as a lead.
You immediately
can directly
choose,
book
have the meeting, and then it also takes place. Because you don't have to first reach people and so on. So you just eliminate these steps and therefore increase your conversion rate. Or like speaking of this aha moment. I think is a great example for example, Ofo, these bike shares that we had in Berlin and other cities. They actually set up their app and the registration in a way that when you downloaded the app, you could immediately rent a bike and ride it, and only for the second ride you actually needed to register and give your credit card details and so on. So I think this is also a great and not so intuitive idea to first let people have the experience, because obviously then the likelihood of them seeing the value of your product and having the confidence in your product that they're going to do all these annoying steps of like confirming the phone number, the email address, putting in a code, sharing credit card details and so on, so that this is more likely that they will do that. Looking at the retention stage, for example, we can stay in the bike sharing business. There's Mobike that I believe in Germany at least have basically killed Ofo and the others, and their strategy is that they lock people in with a subscription. And so I think that is also then a great retention strategy, because if you see that for the price of just a few rides per month, you can actually get unlimited rides. Many people will be interested in doing that, and once they do that, you really got people locked in, and they're not going to be very open to using the competition if they already do pay for your service with a low fee. And I see that they're also testing a lot around that with like different prices for different users, and also slowly increasing the price for the people that do already have a subscription. So in these areas, there's a lot to test and a lot to do. And I think Amazon Prime is...
Well, let me just also comment on the mobile example, and to my information at least, I don't know if that's true or not, but I think it makes sense, is that the spending of a customer on mobile actually with a subscription now is higher than it used to be before. Yeah, so booking individual rides, the average spending per customer per year or per month was lower than now with the subscription model. Yeah, and that's what you want, obviously, so that your share of wallet with the overall customer increases. And yet you can especially do that if you have a virtual product like Spotify, for example. Yeah. So, or if you have a product like mobile, where the capacity of where you have an overcapacity, so you can. I mean, a lot of the bikes are standing around a lot of the time. So, and if you can make, I don't know, I think it's €8 or €10 a subscription. So you make 120 euros per customer per year. That's a pretty decent value per customer. And if you only are able to get 60. But people have to pay individual rides. Despite per ride you make less money, I think the share of wallet argument is probably stronger, and a similar argument you'll see with Spotify, for example. But now I didn't want to stop you from the Prime, going a little more into Prime, which is probably the mother of all growth hacks.
The prime example of creating retention, I would say. So, I mean, of course, there's email marketing, app marketing, and so on, that is always an important part of the strategy, but just also looking at designing your product in a way that it creates retention, and also that it creates retention across, with the Amazon case, verticals that you offer, is really genius. And if you look at what Prime offers, in terms of the benefits for faster delivery, free delivery, and so on, but also giving you access to their different products, and then you see the conversion rates that Amazon has, and the CLVs that they have with the Prime customers, then you can really see that this creates a massive log-in effect for the customer. And so it's actually, you can of course argue that this costs a lot of money, and it's the same like with mobile. You can argue that you're basically capping the maximum spend that a customer will typically do. But if the program is designed right, then this is basically the money that you don't need to spend on acquiring your existing customers again and again, because they have paid for using your service constantly. And we see a lot of companies doing this successfully.
And you also see, I mean, also that translate also to put that into numbers, to my knowledge, or if I remember correctly, the Amazon marketing cost as a percentage of revenue is something like 2.8 or 3.5%, whereas an Otto or Zalando are usually in the 10% range, and that is basically quantifying this effect. I mean, not Prime only probably that has led to that, but I think it's a great example. And Zalando Plus, which is like the Zalando €15 version of Prime, which also includes faster delivery and returns are being collected at your home, and it includes, I think, like some exclusive offerings and deals that you get first. So and so for €15, that has also, to my knowledge and information, increased significantly the repeat purchase rate of customers that are Zalando Plus part. So you don't need to produce Amazon Originals to create more customer loyalty. Yeah, so that's great. So let's talk, coming to an end, let's talk probably a little bit about what kind of changes do we expect concerning growth in the future. I mean, what do you kind of changes in the importance or the role do you expect?
Yeah, I think that in the US by now it is very established that growth is basically the the foundation of success of businesses, and we see companies like Airbnb, Uber, and Facebook that have worked with this model from day one and that keep growing and that are immensely successful with this. This was also a process in the US to that more and more companies saw the relevance of really focusing on growth. And in Germany and in Europe in general, this isn't the standard yet. Mm-hmm. And if you ask me, I think that this is actually also a big part of the reason why we don't see that many businesses in Europe and in Germany that are taking off as those US-based businesses that I've just mentioned. And you can of course copy a product, like StudiVZ copying Facebook or Wimdu copying Airbnb, but just copying like a snapshot of a product and not using the approach that these businesses are using for constantly innovating, constantly growing is not going to lead you anywhere, as we saw with the fate of these businesses, for example. And so I really think that we need to get more and more businesses in Europe to adapt this growth mindset and really to have every CEO and every founder embrace this, create growth teams and give them the opportunity to really create growth at every stage of the company. And I think that this will be a key ingredient for creating really huge and successful companies also in Europe that continue growing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, there's probably more factors also where we have I guess the smaller home markets and less availability of capital. Also factors, but I would 100% agree with you that we need more companies embracing this to the fullest, because that at least increases, if you're successful, increases the likelihood or the chances to really become a mega hit. Yeah. And obviously the mega hits produce majority of the returns in our industry, so that is a fact.
I think you can fairly say that while not all companies that have a growth team become unicorns, basically all unicorns that we see have growth teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair to say. That's probably the case. So cool. Thanks a lot, Aaron, for all your insights and all your ideas and also the practical suggestions, what you can
welcome.
do. And if you have any questions or any remarks, just send it to podcast@projecta.com. So Aaron will try to answer anything that we get. One last remark, we also will have the Project A KnowledgeCon, where more knowledge is going to be shared. Not only Aaron's great ideas, but lots more in terms of product, in terms of IT, in terms of BI, in terms of marketing. On the 27th of September in Berlin, the Project A Knowledge Conference. You find more information on our website and you can apply for Wildcard. It's a free event. We unfortunately have less capacity than interest, but if you apply, we will check whether we can still get you in, and we have doubled capacity compared to last year, so the chances have increased, and hope to see you there. Thanks a lot.
We'll see you there. Thank you.